Good morning and welcome to the Gritty Tales Writing Vlog. I am, as always, Tyler M. Mathis, and today we're going to be talking about dialogue, which is a facet of fiction that many authors struggle with. Now, I'm not talking the grammar aspects of dialogue. If you don't already know, for example, that you set off people's names in dialogue with a comma, 2 commas if the name falls in mid-sentence, then you need English 101. You don't need Tyler M. Mathis. However, since I'm feeling benevolent today, I invite you novice writers to stick around as well, because even a potential writer can learn from what I'm about to relate. For years, I didn't understand why dialogue brings so many writers grief. I mean, the phenomenon mystified me because I've never struggled with writing dialogue. In fact, dialogue happens to be my strong point, and there's a reason for that. So today we're going to delve into why so many writers have this problem and how you can step up your dialogue game. Let us examine the root of this problem. Now, writers hail from nearly all social classes and walks of life, yet the vast majority of us share one common trait. We're introverts. I mean, it only makes sense. Extroverted people are gregarious and at home in groups of people. Generally speaking, they don't participate in solitary endeavors like writing, which requires long hours of alone time. They're just not into being by themselves for very long. Introverts, however, don't deal with many people. And those whom we do speak with in our social and business circles tend to be either similar people with matching interests or jobs, or family members, some of whom we might have a hard time relating to. Socially speaking, we just don't get out that much to experience events and meet different types of people in the wider world. Now, in some cases, this alone time is beneficial to our writing, other than the fact that it gives us the time to write. But even when we're not writing and we're alone, we can spend that alone time in professional study. We can read fiction by other authors, research our latest writing projects, study grammar and vocabulary. At least those are the things we should be doing when we're alone and unoccupied anyway. I realize that is not always the case. But even so, say we are doing those things in our spare time. Studying only gets us so far. And when it comes to writing dialogue, the only activity just mentioned that's going to help you is reading someone else's fiction. And then it's only going to help you if the dialogue is well written. And you'd be amazed how many big-time authors screw up dialogue, particularly the literary types whenever they have to write conversations between people from social classes they aren't familiar with. Those classes are basically anyone who didn't come of age in the hallowed halls of academia. So how do they get away with writing bad dialogue? Well, it's very easy. Their reviewers come from the same background. They don't call out these authors because they don't see the problem either. Now, whether you write literary or genre fiction, chances are you likewise hail from a strong academic background, because writing's an intellectual pursuit. Most of us went to college at least for a while, and many hold bachelor's and postgraduate degrees in fields pertinent, or at least helpful, to fiction writing. Many took courses in creative writing, which are unfortunately yet necessarily taught by career academics. Now, why did I just say that it's unfortunate, pardon me, why did I just say that it's unfortunate that writing courses are taught by career academics? I mean, after all, these professors are trained writers, and they can certainly teach you about things like pacing, character development, construction, plotting, etc. But most of them can't teach you how to write dialogue between those outside their social class. They don't have a clue how to write, for example, a conversation between a couple of working stiffs, or a military commander briefing his men before a mission, because they don't spend any time around these people. And if they have to write such dialogue, it's usually horrible. It comes off as stilted and unrealistic to readers who reside in the real world. And genre fiction has to be real. If it isn't, you lose. I mean, the battle's over. You have lost the battle for the reader's attention span. They're going to recognize your cluelessness, drop your book, and pick up their phone. Dialogue is key to keeping the reader's attention. And in our stories, we need everybody from lowlifes to lords properly speaking according to their backgrounds and social status. So what is this solution to improving your dialogue? Now, we already covered improving dialogue by reading authors who know how to write dialogue. And you can also pick up some good tips by watching certain well-written movies or TV shows. Martin Scorsese movies, for example, really capture well how mafiosos speak, you know, things of that nature, movies of that nature. But this is no guaranteed route, because unfortunately the quality of writing in motion pictures and television has degenerated over the decades, because most of the writers learned their trade in screenwriting courses as opposed to out in the real world, you know, kind of like novelists or, you know, short fiction writers, whatever. So you know what's coming next there, introverted writers. To improve your dialogue past the stage of stereotyping characters you don't come into contact with in your daily life, you're going to have to go out in the real world. Now, you can talk to the group of people you're writing about, of course, if they're interested in conversing with you. And you might even think this is the best course of action. And by no means is it a bad course of action, and I don't discourage you doing this. But you need to remember that a person of a different social class, occupation, or background, be it lower or higher than yours, probably isn't going to be frank and open up to you because you're not one of them. Take, for example, some rich business owner at the 19th hole bar at the local country club. He's not going to speak to you in the same manner as he does with his peers, nor is the day laborer sitting in a dive bar getting bombed out of his gourd. I mean, you start talking to him and he's not interested in speaking, he's more likely to break a pint glass over your head. So, a bottom line when it comes to going out and talking to people is that people are great at recognizing their own. And if you're not one of them, then they're going to be guarded in what they say most of the time. Now, all that being said, the advice I'm about to give should sit well with you, introverted writer. You don't have to talk. Just shut up and listen. It's that easy, and it's how I learned to write realistic dialogue. You're not going to learn how to do this overnight, however. You need to make it a long-term project. But honestly, compared to learning a lot of other aspects of writing, I think you'll find this method of learning to write dialogue, it can be pretty fun. It's amusing. So hear me out. Let's go over it. What you need to do is visit venues that attract a diverse range of people. And by diverse, I don't mean it as it's usually taken nowadays. Of course, race is a part of it, but there's also social classes, occupations, everything that makes us different. You want to go to, a true melting pot of people. Now, here in Pennsylvania, we have a lot of festivals. We have beer festivals, cannabis festivals, the Garlic Festival up in the Poconos, Music Fest in Bethlehem, which is a huge thing and attracts all sorts of stars. These are the sorts of venues I'm talking about visiting. Say, for example, you want to learn how bikers talk to one another. Well, they're usually in evidence at these places, so just grab a beer, post yourself at an adjacent table, and eavesdrop on them. Just listen to them, nothing else. The same goes for any other class or group in attendance whom you'd like to get an ear for. So you don't have any festivals near you? Okay, go to a concert, go to a sporting event, and just tailgate. You don't need to buy a ticket, to go inside. You don't have to pay hundreds of dollars. Just pay the parking fee, hang out and party in the lot, and listen to people. And there are a ton of other venues you can hit. I mean, in Jersey, for example, where I grew up, you can go to one of the boardwalks on the shore. They attract a very wide range of people. Outdoor flea markets and outlet malls, those are good choices, and they don't just attract lower and middle class people. You'd be amazed how many wealthy people stay that way by buying secondhand clothes and merchandise. There are a lot more than you'd think anyway. So those are just a few examples of venues you can hit. So consider what you have locally that attracts a broad range of people and just hang out, listen, and watch. Now, if you've never people watched and eavesdropped on conversations before, it's pretty fun and you're going to learn a lot. Evaluate each group and class you overhear. This is key. Pay close attention to their speech patterns, cadence, accent, grammar, slang, all of it, as well as the physical and social mannerisms that are common to the group. In a group, say, of jocks or soldiers, for example, you'll witness a lot of macho posturing and cavalier, good-natured insults within the group. Whereas in a gaggle of chattering class suburban housewives, you'll usually catch at least a hint of self-importance as the speaker just rambles off details of her last vacation or just boring everyday shit, always in the most grandiose manner possible. You'll notice how sullen the working poor usually are, and how the rich generally are subdued and quiet out in public, and they usually distance themselves from others in the crowd. As an example of how my method works, I'd like to relate some of my personal experience in learning dialogue. Now, I've told you that dialogue is probably my strongest suit as a writer, and that's because as a young man I unwittingly stumbled into a truly bottomless polyglot of dialogue. That is, the military, more specifically the Marine Corps. I met all types there, people of every social class and race, even people from other countries who were serving to get a leg up on U.S. citizenship. Brilliant people, dumb people, arrogant, humble, courageous, cowardly. I met every mindset you can imagine. And there's no better place to learn accents than in the military. Today I can guess with reasonable accuracy where an American is from simply by their accent because I've heard every single one and I listened and learned. It was a hard way to learn. And I didn't join the Marines with writing in mind. I had no notions of becoming a writer when I joined. But the experience serves me well every time I sit down to write. It's my leg up on dialogue. And please note that I only relate that for informational purposes regarding my background and why dialogue comes so easily for me. I am in no way advocating that you youngsters out there should join the military, especially with the current climate of world events. Like I said, strictly for informational purposes. Let's talk for a bit about colloquial speech. Let's assume that you've already spent some time listening instead of running your mouth or relying upon the dubious sources of poorly written novels, movies, or TV shows. Bully for you. And chances are you've noticed that most people, excluding the highly educated, do not speak in grammatically correct fashion most of the time. They don't say they're going to do something, but rather that they're gonna do it. And the great thing about dialogue is it's the one aspect of writing where you're allowed, nay, you're encouraged, to break the rules of grammar and spelling. This is called writing in colloquial speech. Now, not all writers, even those proficient in dialogue, use colloquial speech, probably because it looks odd on paper and they're not very good at it. For colloquial speech still requires consistency, which we'll get into in a moment. You can make grammatically correct dialogue work among those who don't speak it, but only if the reader already knows the nature of who's speaking. Pardon me there. Let's say the quantum physics professor is speaking to the janitor, and we already know who they are and that they're from two different classes of people. In this case, the reader's imagination takes over. The janitor might say on paper, "I'm going to mop the floor in a minute, Professor." But savvy readers now, they're smart enough to know the janitor probably butchers his English. So they read the line and hear something different, such as, "I'm going to mop the floor in a minute, Professor," or "I'm a mop the floor in a minute, Professor." This method works, but is limited by our knowledge of the characters, or should I say, the reader's knowledge of the characters. It's much easier to write dialogue colloquially, in other words, just how people actually talk. A lot of people, at least some of the time, leave the G off of words ending in ing. If that's the type of character you're writing, feel free to leave off the G if that's what you hear in your head. They don't always do it. It's a case-by-case basis. And using that G example, if you do leave it off, you don't have to end the word with an apostrophe after the N. You can, and I've done it in the past. It used to be a pretty established rule, but it's really not necessary any longer. And don't worry about using words like wanna, gotta, gonna, shoulda, so long as they're words the character would use. If the character speaks rapidly, feel free to leave out the commas where they might fall in a sentence uttered by a slower speaker, case by case. When writing colloquially, you can even leave out the commas that set off people's names. Now, I never do that just out of habit. It can lead to sloppiness. Bad habits are never something we want to get ingrained into our routine. It's a topic for another video. Anyway, however the character sounds in your head, it's okay to write his speech that way. You don't have to, but it's easy and it's kind of fun. But you have to be consistent about it. Let's say your character frequently ends his sentences with the phrase, "isn't it?" You may decide to write the ever-popular "in it." That would be I-N-N-I-T. However, if you do this, don't spell it differently the next time you use it. For example, spelling it out as two words, "itn't it?" That would be I-T-N''T. The only time you would change how the character says it would be if he's trying to speak properly, say in a job interview. The guy says to the interviewer, "I'm doing great, sir. Beautiful day outside, isn't it?" That's just one example. Hopefully you get the point, because I'm not going to give you another. So that about wraps up my little primer on how to improve your dialogue game. If it doesn't sound so blasé as the exercises assigned to you in English class, then that's a good thing. As introverts and academics by and large, writers tend to put too much emphasis on classroom instruction and not enough effort into real-world training. Both are important, and though I never really enjoyed serving my time in the classroom, I neither discount nor forget what I learned from several excellent English language educators. But you can't be afraid to step out of that academic box now and then. And really, what better on-the-job training can there possibly be than just hanging out and listening to people talk? I think you'll find it fascinating, even addicting, especially once you realize just how beneficial it is to just shut up and listen. I thank you all for watching. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to read how I handle dialogue, then buy my fiction already. All the links are listed below. All you gotta do is click. We'll catch you here next week. That is all.